Manga. You know him, and so do I. I'm willing to believe that everyone watching this video has at least read one chapter of one. If you've watched a few of my videos before, then you may have heard me frequently repeat the fact that I don't often do. So in an attempt to interact with the popular giants of the medium more, I decided to do the only thing a man like myself can do. I played some weird PS2 video game adaptations. Lots of them. So today I'll be going through a few that I find in some form or another interesting and comparing them to what I've read of their source material, judging them both as an adaptation and as a standalone game. Without further ado, let's get started. Let's start with something both widely known and simple. Kenshiro. Well, that's the name I grew up with, but depending on where you live you might know it as Hokuto no Ken or Fist of the North Star instead. Now, I'm sure at least some of you are familiar with the Arc System Works fighting game, but that's a game that's been discussed plenty before. However, I'm not like normal people, and I prefer to go out of my way to play unnecessary shit that doesn't need to exist. Thus, I present to you the Sega Ages 2500 series remake of the Kenshiro Sega Mark II beat-em-up. For context, Sega Ages 2500 was a small run of low-budget PS2 remakes of old Sega games. Now, a lot of people were, much like Dragonland in the Sega Ages 2500 remake of Space Harrier, screaming at me for saying that these remakes are good in my Phantasy Star videos. And to those people I say, fuck you. I do whatever the fuck I want, who's going to stop me? The Sega Intelligence Agency? Whatever the case, this was one of those remakes, and as such it doesn't look particularly pretty. But looks have never made a game good. I mean, if they did, then Star Ocean 3 would be an atrocity. Since the original is included in this, I may as well talk about it too. It's pretty basic. Get a punch and a kick and that's just about it. The remake adds a bit more meat to its bones. For one, killing enemies now fills up your Big Dipper gauge, which you can then use to select one of 4 special abilities, which you can then use to kill enemies even faster. And that's pretty much all there is to the game. Not even the story is in any way really present. Hell, it may as well not even exist. The original Kenshiro story is wonderful to this day and an excellent read, but this game is just going from stage to stage and sometimes speeding up people from the manga with a bit of dialogue in between. Yeah, that's it, really. So, while this game may not have been that great, I still had a decent bit of fun with it, and I like messing around with the multiplayer stuff every now and then. Baki is a manga about incredibly buff people with no necks, talking about how their fighting styles are super powerful for like 3 volumes, and then beating the shit out of each other for another one. Consequently, the game has no story, and it's just a regular fighting game. And, it is definitely a fighting game that exists. God, these models just don't look good at all. Sometimes I stare into the sky and ponder if God truly has left us. Whatever the case, it's bad, really bad. Attacking feels stiff and unresponsive. Animations look... well, you can see it. They look like they're running at half the speed they're supposed to, and the weight of the characters is just abysmal. Nothing feels quite right, and it's generally just a pretty unenjoyable experience. But I would be lying if I said I didn't have an absolute blast playing it with friends and making fun of it. Look at this shit, it's hilariously bad. Now, the Gantz game is rather interesting. It adapts the manga story up until the Buddha alien mission, and it does so more or less faithfully enough to be recognized. Well, granted, I've not gotten there and I have no interest in doing so, as out of all the manga I read for this video, this is the one I read the least of. Either way, the gameplay is split into 2 parts. On one hand, you occasionally get a dialogue choice that ends up changing your relationship with your teammates. The better your relationship, the better their performance in battle. The missions themselves are quite simple and usually play out the same. Select your weapons and teammates and then beat the shit out of aliens. You can also go into superpowered mode that allows you to deal more damage and interact with the environment more directly, and standing next to certain objects lets you throw that shit right into your enemies. The combat can unfortunately get really tedious, with enemies being incredibly tanky, only made worse by the fact that none of the ranged weapons pack any real punch. In the end, it just evolved into me going up to the enemies' faces and bashing my sword against their heads until they died, whilst hoping that my partners would do literally anything. Which they never did. It gets quite repetitive really quickly, but I'm sure that if you're a fan of the series, then you might just find a lot to enjoy in it. But as for me, I think I'd rather stick to Operation Winback on Nintendo 64 or something to get my janky third-person shooter fix. Much like Kenshiro and Fighting Fury, Project Arms doesn't really care about trying to retell the story. Instead, you're just thrown right into the gameplay after a short intro cutscene. Not even a single word is uttered during the entire game. And really, that's for the best because this is an arcade-style beat-em-up, through and through. The gameplay is rather basic, with a handful of attacks each, but man, I would be lying if I said using stupidly overpowered moves to mow through waves of enemies in seconds wasn't really satisfying. It's incredibly arcadey in the best way possible. It helps that there are multiple playable characters in the game who are all just about different enough to make replaying the game with them a worthwhile endeavor. Especially considering that you can easily beat it in under an hour. The boss fights are easily the best part about the game, but some of them are unfortunately also the worst. With all of them having some sort of weird gimmick, which is either pretty damn fun or just a pain in the ass. Unfortunately, no in-betweens. Attacks can also feel incredibly weak, and I tend to end up spamming the same 3 moves just because they're ridiculously busted. So I'd be lying if I said the game was all that mechanically in depth, or even that well designed. But what really saves the experience in my eyes though, is the music. It's got this insane grunge rock, I suppose you might call it, that reminds me a lot of the SNES Megami Tensei games in the best way possible. This is the nicest thing you'll ever hear me say about the entire Megaton multimedia franchise, by the way. I probably had the most fun with the absolutely insane versus multiplayer, because that shit is so hilariously bad that I can't stop laughing at it. I had a great time with this game. Is this better than, say, God Hand or Dynamite Cobb when it comes to 3D beat-em-ups? No, fuck no, absolutely not. No game is, to be fair, but like, it's still a decently fun game if you're in the mood for punching people in linear stages. I'd argue it's the best game out of the ones I've talked about in this video so far, but for now, let's move on. Hajime no Ippo is a classic, so it getting a game adaptation really wasn't that surprising to me. But what really caught me off guard was how realistic it is, in terms of simulating boxing I mean. Sorta, let me explain. Your movement is mapped to the left stick, but light movements instead just move the character's upper body. Aside from that, it's as you'd expect from a boxing sim. You can weave and dash and bob in every direction, and use several types of punches, such as hooks and jabs. It's an incredibly slow-paced game, but the amount of detail is honestly impressive. They really try to make it as much a boxing simulation as possible, to the point where there isn't even an UI. Instead, all the damage is shown to the player by physical bruises on the characters themselves. I won't lie, it's pretty damn cool. Story-wise, it follows the manga pretty well, so if you're a fan of it, you'll probably love this game. Hell, even if you have absolutely no interest in a manga and just want a really good and solid boxing sim, then this game is absolutely perfect for you. There was a sequel, but I haven't played it. Though, with a foundation as good as this one, I have little doubt that it's at least enjoyable. Azumi is weird. I'd hesitate to call it either good or bad, as it's kind of just whatever, but it consistently stays weird. Whilst most action games give you several inputs to pull off different moves, Azumi instead makes you shuffle between 3 attacks at a time. A jump attack, a charged slash, and a regular slash. Each of these 3 is color-coded, and attacking enemies of the same color will cause a combo meter to appear. Killing more enemies in this state will then raise the score. It's an incredibly awkward system, but you get used to it as you keep playing. Unfortunately, the missions usually consist of killing every single person you see, including civilians, and then moving on to the next area. It's really repetitive, but it at least stays in line with the manga's incredibly violent mood. Because the combat is frankly not that fun, you may be tempted to just ignore enemies and run, but more often than not, an invisible wall will just be there to stop you from doing so. This is definitely not the worst game on this list, but it is also far from the best. It just kind of exists, honestly. I love Berserk. The breathtaking artwork, the beautiful story, the incredible characters, all of it never fails to amaze me with its incredible amount of intricacies. Guts' fights with the Apostles consistently showcase his raw strength, as well as the absolute devastating powers of his adversaries, and so it only feels natural to adapt it into a heavyweight action game. So it's a shame that only ever 3 Berserk games have been made, and out of all of them, this one is the best. As the title implies, it covers a majority of the Millennium Empire arc, albeit heavily arted in a lot of places to better fit the pacing of a video game. The basic stages feel like nothing more than a not-cramped version of the Dreamcast game. It gets really boring incredibly quickly, amounting to little more than reaching the end and mashing the attack button whilst doing so. You have several bonus abilities like being able to summon Guts' allies for help or using his arm cannon and crossbow, as well as entering rage mode. But unless you're actively out to grind any XP, you'll probably end up doing what I did and skipping most enemies. The bosses on the other hand are where the game really shines. You seriously get to utilize Guts' arsenal to its fullest, and the weight of your swings is incredibly well conveyed. The cinematic counters add a sense of scale to the battles that really elevates them from regular fights, and it's just so awesome to see. The production value on this game is insane, and I would definitely recommend any Berserk fan to check it out. Now, I've been holding back on the best for last. Blood Will Tell is fucking awesome. This game is so good, it single-handedly got me to read all 3 of the Dororo manga, watch both anime, and experience the hilariously bad live-action movie. Gameplay-wise, it's quite basic when it comes to the action genre, but it goes absolutely insane with the concept of the story. Every body part you regain affects gameplay in some way, be it as a regular stat-up or as something actively substantial. Getting your left eye back, for instance, gives the screen color again. Getting a leg back lets you dash. Getting an arm back lets you dual-wield katanas and so on. While they do end up repeating bosses toward the end, which can get really tiring, it was still an absolute blast, and the constant tangible rewards for going out of your way to kill every single one of them is more than worth it. Especially since you need to unlock the ending. It kind of feels like a Metroidvania in that sense, as you end up going from this to this. And honestly, this is unironically the best version of the story, feeling like a natural evolution of how the original manga played out. It's also the only version of the story to have an ending that isn't, shit. It alters the events of the manga a lot, but I do feel that all of the changes are for the better, such as aging the characters up quite a bit so that Hyakumaru is an adult instead of a kid. I always found it a bit weird that he'd be able to stand up to the fiends as a 14-year-old, but, the order and context of a lot of story arcs were also changed, but again, I think those changes all serve to enhance the story more than anything else. It's also not too long, making sure that it never overstays its welcome. The final boss is also a serious test of skill on all levels, and while some might find it to be a pain in the ass, I personally loved it. God, this game is good. If there's even a single thing you should take away from this video, it's that you should absolutely check out Blood Will Tell, whether you've read Dororo, or any of its adaptations, or not. Hell, even if you don't wanna read it or watch it, because this game owns on every front, even though it has absolutely no right to be this good. And with all of that said, do me a favor here, and have a fantastic day. Cheers.